especially as you progress into a higher level of skill, to cultivate other fighting styles and just whatever your primary style was. If you start to glaive, get into sword and shield. So sword and shield, get into, sword and axe or two-sword, for example. But the problem I see in a lot of that is people, get so excited about something new that they'll abandon one thing before they've reached a level of mastery, and then play with this other thing, and they've sort of like muddied the waters in their foundational techniques. So what I've tried to do in my time is, reach a level of, competency or mastery in one style, and then move on to the next, and try to accomplish, a similar goal in that next style. And that's what I've done with fighting with two-sword. So when I picked up two-sword fighting, probably close to 8 or 10 years ago, for the first couple of years, I fought maybe 80% two-sword and maybe 20% sword and shield. Mostly kind of keep my sword and shield style kind of up to snuff when I needed to do that. And then sort of I found that by extension of fighting two-sword, that my single sword technique improved. I was fighting with both hands, so when I was in a situation in a tournament where I would lose my arm, my left-handed technique was still, almost as solid as my right-handed technique. And it's to the point now where people don't drop their shields, as is commonly done, when they've come across me with a single sword. And actually, for me, that's the funnest part of single sword is, it's one thing to slap around against another person with a single sword, but to try and find the openings in somebody's style, whether it's a glaive or a sword and shield or another two-sword fighter with your single sword is probably one of the funnest things I've ever done in sword fighting. Aside from fighting two-sword against our current Crown Prince, who is a masterful bastard sword fighter. Sorry, completely lost my head here. So today we're going to do mostly two-sword technique, and then we're going to move into, I'll do some foundational techniques. We'll show you some drills that can help kind of reinforce that technique. It's also drills you can take home with you and practice at home on the Pell against each other, what have you. And then we'll do some fighting critique afterwards. Once we've got into the fighting and critique, I'm actually going to kind of break a little bit, and then we're going to move into the single sword stuff. The single sword stuff is really sort of a derivative of the two-sword, so it's not going to require a lot of foundational stuff once we've gone through the two-sword stuff. The one thing, speaking of two-sword, that I can recommend to everybody is practice how you fight. Too many times I go to a practice and you see a guy get armed and they go, all right, I'll yield, thank you very much, and then they go on to the next fight. Well, how do you train to fight single sword if that's the case? You get into a tournament at some point, you get armed, and you get these guys that have no idea what they're doing because they've just had no opportunity to even practice techniques if they've even been shown those techniques. So if you take nothing away from this class other than this, practice how you fight. Do it in practice like you do on the tournament field. So, I'm not much for standing around and talking to you guys, so we're going to actually get up and get into some of these techniques straight away. I will say that this is one of the first classes I've taught in sort of a structured format. So I brought my handy-dandy outline. We're kind of learning together in this respect, so bear with me a little bit, but I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So if everybody wants to kind of grab a couple sticks, stand up, let's kind of get in.